um, non-exploitation. So don't exploit people. It seems like pretty straightforward, but this comes out in sort of subtle ways sometimes. Um, I have some clients, for example, that are concerned about the type of imagery they're viewing.
Yeah.
How do they know that this imagery did not exploit somebody?
Yeah.
You know, I've heard some people argue, well, if maybe if you're paying for it and it was done by some reputable company or something, you can trust more that these people were paid fairly and treated well or whatever. So there's some ethical things that clients have to think through. But otherwise, like most of my clients are not paying, first of all. Whether they should or not, that's a different debate
Yeah.
than here. But they don't know where this image was coming from. They're just Googling typically, or they're looking on some like mainstream, like YouTube kind of sites
Mm.
that probably ripped their videos from somewhere else. You know, who knows if this imagery has taken advantage of or harmed a woman or a vulnerable population?
Yeah.
It's an important thing to think about that I think sometimes we don't talk about very much.
Yeah.
So that's one issue, but to get there, you have to ask the clients, you know, what are you looking at? And some kinds of, I think some kinds of treatment programs don't ask that enough,
Wow.
uh, or get really clear about what it is that you're into. It's just like, okay, this is pornography. It's bad.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean by pornography? One time, somebody said to me, I'm struggling with pornography. I said, well, what are you watching? And they said, well, I look at Victoria's Secret magazines.
Yeah.
And I said, I totally see how in your perspective, this is defined as pornography, but a lot of people would consider that to be, it's sexual in nature. It's alluring or it's erotic, but it wouldn't be considered pornography. And then the
It might be
client
an
said,
advertisement.
right. Then the client said, oh, well, I guess I've never looked at pornography then. I was like, oh, you know, so getting sort of more clear about the type of imagery and how some of it can be exploitative. And I mean, speaking of, things like current issues today, like racism,
Yeah.
there is a lot of racist content out there that promotes very racist stereotypes. And
Mm.
this is totally my soapbox kind of issue. And um, other people may not agree, but I feel like just because you add sex to something does not all of a sudden make it okay.
Mm.
Okay, I know racism is bad, but if I add eroticism to it, then it's okay.
Wow.
And it's just something I've been kind of thinking about lately around the type of sexual behaviors and the type of imagery that people are viewing. And like, I'm not saying like this is what people should be doing or not, but just kind of bringing up this issue I think is important.
Yeah, being thoughtful about that. Like, these are people's lives. We don't know their background and their ability to choose freely. And I think that's probably my biggest concern with pornography is like, there might be a lot of people exploited there. And I struggle with that concept. I understand why people are viewing. They're not, a lot of people are not viewing for that intention. And
Yeah,
yet there might be people that were harmed
yeah,
in these films. And it is, I think, helpful to think about that. Is this truly consensual? And are people freely choosing this? And a lot of people maybe aren't.
yeah. So in terms of imagery, that's a sort of an non-exploitation kind of piece. But I think also in terms of behavior with other people, non-exploitation involves not leveraging your power
Hmm.
control to receive gratification. I meet with people all the time that feel like, yeah, I wasn't raped, but this was not a good situation, and I felt pressured. And I said yes, but I regret it. And I really felt like if I had said no, then there would have been a long conversation, and he would have pressured me more and more and more. And so that the client themselves is not defining it as I didn't consent or saying I did, but I felt exploited, I felt controlled. Um, and some people who are doing this exploiting, like they don't think of it that way, or they're not realizing it. These are sort of people who think they're good guys or whatever. But it's important to consider.
It's a big deal,
Yeah,
especially in our world, because we hear those stories over and over of sexual trauma and these things where other people may not even be aware of it, but it has a huge impact on people's well-being.
I mean, I've even seen this in a number of marriages where both partners were sexually abstinent before marriage, and which is fine, and that fits with their values, great. Um, and then in some cases, it wasn't because of the abstinence, but in some cases, they had some interactions, some sexual interactions early on in the marriage where one felt exploited,
Mm.
or they felt pressured beyond just like, hey, can we please have sex sometime soon? Like beyond that, to the point like, if I don't consent to my husband, then he's going to be upset.
Yeah.
And so the relationship kind of takes this flavor of pressure and duty, and I've got to do this, which kills desire.
Mm.
So some other things to think about, but those are kind of on a different tangent than sexual imagery, for example.